The printer in the corner of the office costs $40, but the ink that keeps it running will cost you more in the first year than you paid for the machine itself. That looks like a pricing mistake. It is not a mistake. It is the entire business. The more you spend, the more the people who sold it to you want you to keep spending. This is why printer ink costs so much, and why, for the companies that sell it, that is the whole point. Here is the central contradiction that anchors this industry. A cheap inkjet printer can often be bought for less than the price of a pair of decent shoes, yet the little cartridges that go into it can easily cost a third of that each, and you replace them again and again. A typical home inkjet, sold for around $60, can quietly consume well over $100 of ink every single year. Consumer Reports estimated that a Canon printer, commonly priced near $60, cost about $148 a year in ink, pushing its 5-year total cost of ownership to roughly $800 on a printer that costs $60. So the obvious question is, why does not the manufacturer just raise the price of the printer and charge less for the ink? The answer to that question is the heart of the whole business. This is a model with a famous name, razor and blades. Gillette perfected it over a century ago. Sell the razor cheap, sometimes at a loss, because the customer who owns the razor is locked into buying your blades forever. The hardware is the hook. The consumable is the profit.
That is not a hidden
Printer
secret.
makers run the exact
What is
same play.
underappreciated is just how much of the profitability sits on the consumable side of the equation. HP, the largest printer seller in the world, reports 2 business segments. In fiscal 2024, its personal systems division generated about $36 billion in revenue at an operating margin of around 5.7%. Its printing segment generated about $17 billion at an operating margin of nearly 20%. And within that printing segment, roughly $11 billion came from supplies alone, ink and toner.
So printing, and specifically the consumables inside it, is where the margin lives. The hardware is the front door that gets you into the building. Which raises the natural question. If a printer works just as well with a cheap, generic cartridge, why does the expensive ink survive? Because the industry has engineered the answer. Cartridges are proprietary. They contain microchips that authenticate ink, communicate with the printer, and count pages. Some modern printers are designed to block, or at least discourage, third-party and refilled cartridges entirely. The effect is switching costs and lock-in.
Once you own a specific printer, the only reliable ink is the maker's own. There is a deeper insight here about how the cost of ownership gets engineered. Manufacturers know that a standard cartridge is a terrible value by volume, because a typical small color cartridge can cost far more per milliliter of ink than a premium product. Industry estimates of the cost to print a cartridge page often land around 10 to 20 cents, while ink tank printers refill for well under a cent a page. Yet the cheap printer is the thing that gets marketed, because the price tag at the checkout is what wins the sale. The expensive running cost only arrives later, spread across a year, easy to forget. This is the second half of razor and blades. The customer buys the razor on day 1, but the blade is priced on day 265. By then, the purchase is not optional, because the printer needs ink, and only one company makes a cartridge that fits. The manufacturers have even begun to sell the ink as a service.
HP's Instant Ink program, where customers pay a monthly fee for pages rather than cartridges, had grown into a large subscription business. HP executives disclosed a few years ago that Instant Ink had surpassed roughly 10 million subscribers and become a $500 million business,
growing more than 30% a year. Whatever the precise figures today, the direction is unmistakable. The recurring revenue, once buried inside a plastic cartridge, is being made explicit and predictable. Which brings us to the part of the story the ink giants would rather you not think about too closely. The razor and blades model depends on you needing to replace the blade over and over. If someone invents a printer that does not need blades at all, the model breaks. That someone was Epson. In 2011, Epson introduced the EcoTank printer, the EcoTank, a machine with big refillable reservoirs that you top up from bottles of cheap ink rather than throw away
upfront
cartridges.
cost of an EcoTank printer is far higher, commonly $300 or more, versus $60 for a basic cartridge model. But the running cost collapses. Consumer research estimated an EcoTank model's ink cost at around $5 a year, against $148 for a comparable cartridge printer, and a 5-year total cost of ownership around $375 versus $800.
The shift has real momentum. Epson has been the world's #1 ink-tank printer maker since it created the category, and it says it is the #1 inkjet maker globally by volume, around a 34% share, according to IDC figures for late 2025. Refillable tank printers have been taking share from cartridge inkjets, especially in emerging markets, and every major manufacturer now sells a version of them. Even HP, the champion of the cartridge model, has launched tank and instant ink systems of its own. So here is the real story. The printer is not the product. The printer is the hook. The ink is the product, sold at margins that would be astonishing in almost any other hardware category, protected by proprietary design, chips, and lock-in. The customer's total cost of ownership is driven by the consumable, and the manufacturer's profit is concentrated there too. That model is now under real pressure from a better consumer arithmetic. Pay more once, print for almost nothing forever. Whether the cartridge survives or the tank wins, the deeper lesson endures. Whenever you see a durable gadget sold cheap, the profit is rarely in the gadget. It is in whatever you are going to have to keep buying. The question is never how much the machine costs. It is what the machine needs and who controls the supply of what it needs. That is how a product that looks like a printer turns into a money machine, one refill at a time.